What security challenges does Europe face amid the Israel-Hamas war? And what effects are Islamization and mass migration in Europe having on public safety? To address this in depth, we hear from Professor David Engels, a senior analyst at the Institute Zachodny in Poland. Professor David Engels, thank you for your time today. Some say that if they take Israel, then they take Europe next. So what is the danger for Europe here?
Well, there is really a danger that is happening for the moment in Europe itself, because Europe is subject to an enormous evolution of mass immigration now for at least 3 generations. I'm not really sure if the Israeli case is now an immediate danger for Europe, but it is sure, as we have seen with so many Palestinian populations in Europe and so many Muslims with sympathies for Hamas, that indeed there is some effect of spillover through terrorism to Europe.
So how is Europe handling this, considering that we've seen bombings of synagogues and concerns over removing those who create violence?
Well, there's a fundamental difference, of course, between the situation in Israel and in Europe. Terrorism in Europe is rather, or Islamist terrorism in Europe is rather anti-state or anti-society terrorism. It is directed against the West as such, whereas terrorism in Israel is targeting Israel as such, Israel as a nation, as a specific identity. So Israel is not necessarily defending things like human rights or the West or a certain vision of Western values in Israel, but its right to exist, whereas the situation in Europe is quite different because there is another majority different situation also between the Muslims and the European mass population. So there isn't a real symmetry between both. But when it comes to the handling of the situation, well, Europe has a big handicap which Israel has not. Israel is defending its right to survive. It's defending a specific vision of history, of identity, of the Zionist founding myth. In Europe, we have a very different situation. In Europe, a specific view of a humanist, free, open, inclusive society is dominating the elites and is hoping that Western values as such would be sufficiently attractive for the inclusion of Muslims, for the integration. And of course, this doesn't seem to be working. It worked 3 generations ago, but now with the high numbers of immigrants, with the growing radicalization, with the seeking of the 3rd generation migrants for their identity, with their media connection also to their homeland, and also the economic crisis and the high migrant unemployment, it has become very difficult to integrate these migrants, even more so as the left is formally opposed even to the mere idea of integration or assimilation. The left considers that as being some form of Eurocentrism, whereas Europe itself is still strong, dominated by certain complexes of guilt because of the Shoah, because of colonialism, and so forth. So that makes it, of course, very difficult for Europe to act against the dangers of Islamization, of terrorism, of mass migration.
Well, that is very in-depth analysis from you, Professor Engels, senior analyst at the Institute Zachodny in Poland.
Thank you for the invitation.